alt season has yet to arrive. As we are about to close out the post-halving year, we have yet to see even Ethereum durably break its all-time highs. Many are left wondering what happened. Well, in today's video, we're going to explore that very topic. What do I think happened? Why haven't we seen an alt season? What's contributing to this? And why do I think that 2026 is going to be our year? You don't want to miss this one. Like and subscribe down below, and let's hop in to today's video. So guys, I realize this year has been extremely disappointing. We haven't seen the alt season that we were promised. Bitcoin is now dipping below 100K. The bears are in control. Sentiment is at an all-time low. I'm max convicted. So I want to explain why I think 2026 could be the year. And this is actually going to take a little bit of a different approach than you might expect. And so firstly, what I want to draw your attention to is the business cycle. I talk about this a lot, and no, this isn't going to be just a breakdown of PMIs. I'm going to really get into why I think this is happening. So for those of you unfamiliar with the business cycle, it operates in a cycle, naturally, an expansion and a contraction of the economy that pairs very closely with the performance of altcoins. You can see that as ISM goes higher, ETH outperforms Bitcoin. As ISM goes lower, ETH underperforms Bitcoin. The ISM stands for the Institute for Supply Management, and it's how we measure the business cycle. Over 50 being an expansion of the economy, underneath 50 being a contraction that is bad, boo, contraction. And you can see it put a different way. As the ISM goes higher, Bitcoin dominance falls. As the ISM goes lower, Bitcoin dominance rises. When the business cycle expands, we see a broadening out of risk assets into lower quality, lower cap altcoins. This is true in stocks as well. They call it a broadening out in the stock market. We call it alt season. So we would see a rotation from the mega cap techs. We would see a rotation away from the Mag 7 into the rest of the S&P 493, into the Russell 2000, et cetera, et cetera. We typically see tech underperform in the stock market. We typically see Bitcoin underperform in crypto, and eventually Ethereum starts to underperform as profits roll down from Bitcoin to Ethereum, large caps, mid caps, low caps, micro caps, maybe NFTs. So we haven't seen this. Obviously, we know that now. We have not seen this. Why do I think that this is? To put it simply, people are broke. Nobody has any money to make alt season happen. The alt season is a retail-driven, speculative frenzy. And I'll quote Raoul Paul that alt season is a temperature check on the average investor. For the economy to be expanding, for the economy to be booming, the average American, the average business has to be doing better. And so these charts I'm about to be showing you are from Danielle DiMartino Booth. She's the founder and CEO of QI Research. Some really great insights here. I wanted to share them with you, and it makes a lot of sense to me. It actually helped some things click for me. So, total share of population in economic expansion. Remember that this is essentially a reference to the business cycle, expansion. So the individual, low, 20%. We are nearing the low of the great financial crisis and COVID in terms of the total share of the population in economic expansion. Nobody has any money. Nobody has any money. Financial security, tale of two nations. We are in what is called a K-shaped economy. There is a K-shaped economy crisis happening right now, where the economy essentially does this. You have people on the top half of the K, people on the bottom half of the K. You can see that demonstrated right here. The top half of the K, the S&P 500, are people who benefit from this. People who own stocks, people who own a house, people who maybe work in, they have a nice, comfy, white-collar job, they have a salary, 401k match, beautiful healthcare plans, Blue Cross, PPOs, everything. These are people on the top half of the K. People on the bottom half of the K are renting. They do not own assets. They do not own a house. Maybe they're working hourly. Maybe they pay for insurance out of pocket. Maybe they don't have insurance at all. These people have been left behind by the Fed. The Fed has been running aggressively high monetary policy. This has been disproportionately hurting the lower half of the economy. Nobody has any money. Check out Darius Dale just in general over at 42 Macro. He democratizes institutional risk management overlays. So the same risk management tools that giant hedge funds pay tens of thousands of dollars a month for, he makes them available to you for $100. Definitely worth checking out. Anyways, here's this clip from Darius Dale. He's going to help explain why the Fed is perpetuating this K-shaped economy crisis.
If you look at U.S. credit card delinquency rates, nationwide, aggregate U.S. credit card delinquency rates, it's 12.4%, which is basically near the high we reached after the global financial crisis and the Great Recession. But again, we know the rich people in the top part of the K are doing just fine. Business is booming. They're flying around in private jets and they're having a great time. But we also know that if these guys are booming, just think about how much the bottom must be busting in order for the aggregate credit card delinquency rate to be at a level that is consistent with the global financial crisis and Great Recession. In fact, if you look at the auto loan delinquency rate, it's making an all-time high, essentially. Next data point, I guarantee, will be an all-time high, higher than the GFC, higher than COVID. When did this degradation start? It all started in 2022 when the Fed took the policy rate up to 550 basis points.
It all started when the Fed hiked up the interest rate to 5.5%. And that's exactly what we're seeing in these charts. So you can see that here in the total share of population economic expansion. When did we start to fall? Right around 2022. Right now, if you talk to, and I would bet you money, if you talk to 95% of small, medium-sized business owners in the United States, they will tell you that there is one thing that is hurting them the most: high interest rates. Access to capital. Small business demand supply credit availability. They cannot get reliable credit because interest rates are so high. When did this start? It started in 2022 when the Fed absolutely jacked interest rates to 5.5%. And we just saw a steady decline, rise up and a steady decline. And we are at this threshold right here. Going below that correlates to the weakest times in history, right here in the global financial crisis. So we are at an inflection point. And obviously the Fed is starting to cut rates now, but their rhetoric has been that the labor market is fine, financial conditions are not tight. Going back to the ISM, and this is again a chart from Raul Paul, Julian Biddle over at Real Vision, the connection between financial conditions and the ISM, very, very tight. And so I want to play this clip from Daniel DiMartino Booth. She's going to comment on this exact topic of financial conditions in small businesses. Have a listen.
Next time you hear somebody say that financial conditions are not restrictive, ask a small business owner how they feel about the availability of credit, because they will tell you that credit is way too expensive and that they're not Meta or Apple or Oracle.
Word on the street is that capital is hard to obtain. They're not Meta, they're not Apple. They're not these massive companies that don't need lower interest rates to access credit. They don't need lower interest rates to maintain their business. The small and medium-sized businesses that make up the population that would ultimately drive alt season. Remember, alt season is the retail-driven speculative frenzy. I was watching a Ben Cohen analysis the other day on why we haven't had alt season. And his argument came down to the fact that we haven't seen retail. We haven't seen any retail engagement. New follows on X, new subscriptions on YouTube are near bear market lows. That makes perfect sense to me because look at where people are at. Look at the charts that I've been showing you. Look at U.S. households are stressed out. Consumer stress, legal index, highest since COVID. Bankruptcy index, highest since March of 2022. In Google Trends, file for unemployment, we're reaching the highest that it's been in 3 years, that it's ever been in the last 4 years. And so we're seeing weakness. We're seeing structural financial weakness in the retail sector. This makes sense to me why we haven't seen an alt season. Businesses are struggling. People are struggling. If you go on the street, you talk to people, the average person is not doing very well. The very prospect of losing food stamp benefits in the U.S. due to the shutdown was making people scared that there would actually be riots. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were. And so this is why I think we haven't seen alt season. I think it's a big contributing factor. We haven't seen the business cycle because we haven't seen the Fed cut rates and help out that lower section of the economy, probably 70-80% of Americans. I realize crypto is a global asset. I realize that there is more to this than, just the US. Leave it to an American to only focus on the US, right? The US is a big market. It's the largest and most impactful market globally. And the Federal Reserve, through their policy rates, kind of affect the rest of the world. They can export pain through the dollar since it's the reserve currency. So what the Federal Reserve does really does have implications, not just for Americans, but for the rest of the world. And so I think that the sentiment we're feeling here in the States is, can be somewhat extrapolated to the global investment conditions. So why am I excited about 2026? I believe the Trump administration is going to deliberately take actions to essentially curb this or to remedy this. They have been very clear about their intentions to do two things, among other things: fiscal stimulus and monetary stimulus. Fiscal stimulus, government spending that they can control, essentially through the big beautiful bill, less taxing, more government spending. that's stimulative. And so as we know, Trump has recently stated his intention to hand out $2,000 stimulus checks to everyone except high-income earners. That's going to be a big push in the right direction to helping people feel a little bit better about their finances. Also, the new Fed chair that Trump is going to appoint, most likely to be very dovish. Trump says he won't appoint anyone to the Fed who doesn't back rate cuts. Trump to nominate top economic aide Stephen Miran. If you've been paying attention to the Fed minutes, to the way the different voting members are voting, you notice that Stephen Miran has been incredibly dovish. He's dissenting for 50 basis point cuts at every meeting. His forecast of economic projections was the most dovish by multiple cuts. Trump is going to intentionally put someone into the Fed who runs easier monetary policy, who cuts rates, and who probably makes use of the balance sheet, implements some sort of QE policy. This is not to feed you QE hopium, but this is just the reality. The reality is the Trump Fed chair pick is very likely to correct some of the policy mistakes that the Powell Fed made that led us to this, that led us to having some of the top macro risk managers in the world, Darius Dale, Daniel DiMartino Booth, and many others, to outright criticize them and tell them that they're running policy rates way too high. This is not a video to bash the Fed, quite frankly, out of my pay grade, but it's to present you with an argument that we haven't had a business cycle, we haven't had an alt season yet because people don't have any money to invest. People are broke. It's kind of that simple. Not everyone is on their last leg. People do have money. You don't see people living out on the streets all the time. But for the most part, if you speak to the average person, they're kind of struggling. And that's evidenced by the fact we just elected a socialist in New York. And that's not a political statement, but you see those kind of results. You see those kind of election turnouts when young people particularly feel left out, when they feel like they don't have any money and their only way to get ahead in life is to vote for people who will give them things. That is the situation we're in, and I do believe that some of that has been caused by the Fed. So I hope this makes sense to you. I hope you understand where I'm coming from, and I hope it puts you a little bit at ease. For me personally, in my mind, to say to myself that really nothing structurally has changed about what drives bull markets. There are a lot of other structural factors, liquidity cycle, debt refinancing, other components that influence the business cycle taking longer to play out. It makes me bullish, and it makes me believe that the top is not in. Regardless of what price action we see over the weeks to months, I believe that eventually, some point next year, we will see the retail-driven speculative frenzy that is alt season, and that will likely come as a result of some of these charts that we're looking over starting to be reversed, starting to be fixed, and starting to be addressed. Because right now, they haven't been. So let me know what you think about this down in the comments. Do you think the cycle's over, or do you think there's a chance we could go into 2026? Has this been helpful for you? Let me know if you've learned anything. If you like these insights,